Sometimes animals resort to self-inflicted harm, and it's not always driven by hunger. Occasionally, this behavior goes to extremes, and sometimes it's just an evolutionary quirk. Unfortunately, certain creatures like this unlucky bird simply suffer from incredibly bad luck. Even after losing its head, a snake's body can continue to move and even bite itself. When a snake's head is severed, it can still pose a threat because of how snake physiology works. Being cold-blooded, snakes rely on external sources like sunlight and warm surfaces to regulate their body temperature, requiring minimal energy and oxygen to function. This means a snake's head can remain active for minutes or even hours after separation. Snakes likely don't comprehend that they've lost their bodies, so they attack anything nearby. In another instance, a trapped raccoon has ended up consuming part of itself. It's gruesome and shocking, but when wild animals are desperate to survive, they can become so determined that they harm themselves to escape. We'll delve deeper into this later. Meanwhile, this large python met its demise after eating a porcupine, which highlights why mature predators seldom hunt these spiny creatures. Porcupines are difficult to kill due to their quills, which easily detach and embed deep into the attacker, causing great pain. Moreover, porcupines are bold and won't retreat even when faced with larger threats. But even if a predator somehow manages to subdue a porcupine without injury, it still has the challenge of consuming it. The python, unfortunately, wasn't equipped to handle the porcupine, but it's not the only creature struggling with unusual challenges. Spiders, for example, have been observed consuming their own legs. While it sounds bizarre, numerous eyewitness accounts on Reddit describe people catching spiders only to later see them eating their limbs. We even found a couple of articles on the topic. This behavior likely serves as a defense mechanism. Spiders don't consume their legs in a traditional sense, but instead seem to suck them out, consistent with their usual feeding habits. It would be fascinating if one day the BBC made a documentary or at least some videos on this strange phenomenon, though some existing footage is undeniably unsettling. Similarly, here's a deer attempting to cross a road, a scene that highlights a broader issue. The infrastructure of human cities, convenient for us, often proves hazardous for wildlife. Deer, among other animals, frequently fall victim to traffic, a serious problem underscored by statistics showing up to 220,000 car accidents involving deer each year worldwide. Of these incidents, more than 1,000 result in human injuries, and around 20 tragically end in fatalities. The number of deer killed is even higher. Deer often appear to move unpredictably, which can lead them to get caught in trees, a perilous situation even without roads or vehicles involved. Sadly, these encounters, whether on roads or in the wild, reflect a grim, yet somewhat predictable reality for deer. The incident with the falcon truly took me by surprise. What seemed like a routine event quickly turned tragic. The falconer removed the hood from his bird, preparing to let it hunt, but within seconds, the falcon unexpectedly crashed into a passing truck. The suddenness of the event was shocking. To put it into perspective, in the United States alone, between 49 and 340 million birds die each year from vehicle collisions as of 2021. So, what exactly happened here? This footage comes from a Danish cooking and hunting show where the host attempts to hunt and cook different animal species in each episode. In this particular one, the host traveled to France to hunt partridges. Although one of the falcon owners was reluctant to release his bird near the highway, the other hunters persuaded him. Unfortunately, that decision proved to be a fatal mistake. It's hard to imagine that a falcon, a bird known for its intelligence, would make such an error. While it's heartbreaking for the falcon, let's shift back to our discussion of animals harming themselves. Take snakes, for example. The image of a snake biting its own tail has deep roots in ancient mythology. Known as the Ouroboros, which means tail devourer, in Greek, this symbol represents the cyclical nature of life and self-destruction. The ancient Greeks were quite adept at using symbols like this to convey complex ideas. The Ouroboros symbol carries a range of meanings and has been used in religion, magic, alchemy, and even psychoanalysis. Unsurprisingly, the The term eventually found its way into scientific literature on reptiles. For instance, an African lizard species was named Ouroboros cataphractus because of its habit of curling up and biting its tail to form a protective ball, similar to an armadillo, though these lizards are entirely different creatures. Despite the myth, there's minimal scientific evidence of snakes biting their own tails or attempting self-cannibalism. While a few instances of captive snakes nibbling their tails exist, like the 2014 case of a female albino western hognose in the UK, this isn't the primary concern for scientists. Snake behavior in the wild is different, but disturbing videos of snakes biting themselves often involve injured animals, such as those hit by cars. Biologists suggest this behavior is a response to extreme pain. Snakes in distress will thrash and bite whatever they can reach. Beyond trauma and intense stress, some experts theorize that a snake might bite its tail if it's hungry and mistakenly identifies it as prey, or when confused during a fight with another snake. While it sounds odd, it's not far-fetched given how snakes operate. When trying to consume another snake, they can accidentally begin swallowing their own tail. This happens because snakes have an intense feeding response and relatively simplistic brains. They see food, and everything else becomes irrelevant. This self-biting behavior is especially prevalent in snake species that prey on their own kind, such as king cobras in India, whereas other snake species don't usually get confused this way. The situation is simpler when it comes to consuming shed skin. Even humans sometimes have the urge to tear off bits of their skin, like scabs, though it's not advisable. It can lead to infection, and unlike lizards, we don't benefit from it. Certain lizards and frogs, on the other hand, do eat their shed skin, a process known as dermatophagy. Insects like Madagascar hissing cockroaches also consume their old exoskeletons. There are two main reasons for this behavior. Firstly, eating the shed skin hides evidence of the animal's presence, eliminating any odors that could attract predators and reducing the risk of being tracked. Secondly, it helps conserve energy. Even dry, discarded skin contains valuable nutrients, and since the animal has already expended effort to grow and shed it, consuming it is a way to reclaim some of those lost resources. Some animals, like geckos, even start eating their skin while it's still attached to their bodies, which can appear quite unsettling, almost as if the gecko is eating itself. However, this multitasking behavior allows the gecko to shed more quickly, reducing its vulnerability and minimizing the time it needs to remain in one spot. Geckos, by combining shedding and feeding, accomplish two essential tasks at once, often startling anyone who witnesses the process. In a different scenario, this photo of a tiger taken in Thailand a few years ago shows the animal missing a hind paw, likely due to a trap. A similar fate befell a lion caught on camera in 2015 at Murchison Falls National Park. The lion had been ensnared by a poacher's trap. It's not just the traps themselves that are dangerous. Once animals get caught, they fight desperately to escape, much like the raccoon mentioned earlier, sometimes resorting to gnawing off their own limbs in their struggle for freedom. In 2016, a female bear was discovered in China caught in a trap, and to the shock of those who found her, she was chewing off her own trapped paw. Had she succeeded, she might have broken free, but at a tremendous cost. Fortunately, rescuers intervened, saved the bear, and provided medical care, although her paw had to be amputated. The good news is that the bear survived and will now live safely in a dedicated wildlife center. While the bear's actions may seem disturbing, they're often vital for survival. A trapped animal is doomed to die from dehydration or starvation if it remains immobile. However, even with missing limbs, a bear that can move stands a far better chance of survival. Life with a disability is undoubtedly harder, but it's a far better outcome than the certainty of death. Wild animals often thrive even when missing one or more limbs, so the bear made a choice that increased her chances of survival. She's not alone. Many predators, such as wolves, coyotes, cougars, and raccoons, have been known to do the same to escape hunting traps. It's important to note that these instances aren't considered auto-cannibalism. The animals bite off their own limbs, but don't consume them. Instead, they leave the severed limbs behind and quickly flee the dangerous area. However, some animals do resort to eating their own limbs when starving. While spiders remain a bit of a mystery in this context, we do know that mantises sometimes engage in this behavior when they're hungry. It's a disturbing sight, but there's a twisted logic to it. For a mantis, chomping on its own leg is a survival tactic. It's better to reproduce than to keep all limbs intact. The silver lining is that mantises have remarkable regenerative abilities, so those missing legs can regrow after the next molt. Still, this act is a delicate balance. If the mantis consumes too much, it might not survive until the next molting phase. Speaking of insects, it's worth mentioning butterflies. Most people, even children, are familiar with their life cycle. A caterpillar hatches from an egg, devours leaves, spins a cocoon, and eventually transforms into a butterfly. It's a process we've come to accept as normal. The transformation of a caterpillar into a butterfly is both magical and somewhat unsettling. But have you ever wondered what actually happens inside the cocoon? It's not for the faint of heart. After completing its growth and molting phases, the caterpillar stops eating and seeks shelter from the elements. It hangs upside down and wraps itself in silk, a familiar and seemingly normal process. But once the cocoon is formed, things get weird and a bit grotesque. The caterpillar doesn't magically become a butterfly or moth. It undergoes a far more complex and messy transformation. The caterpillar essentially digests itself, releasing enzymes that liquefy almost its entire body. If you were to open the cocoon at this stage, you'd find nothing but a gooey mess.
Gonna have a hell of a meal.
However, within this soup, there are hidden structures known as imaginal discs. These discs are special groups of cells present from the time the caterpillar hatches. During the caterpillar phase, these cells are inactive due to chemicals that prevent them from growing. But once the caterpillar turns to ooze, the imaginal discs remain intact and start multiplying rapidly, using the liquefied remains of the caterpillar as nourishment. Each disc is responsible for forming different parts of the butterfly: wings, legs, antennae, and more. Some discs grow from just 50 cells to over 50,000 in a short time, and eventually, a butterfly or moth emerges from this chaotic process. Interestingly, a small study suggests that butterflies and moths might retain some memories from their caterpillar days, but more research is needed to confirm this. This got me thinking, if small lizards can shed and regenerate their tails, what about larger reptiles? Could something like a Komodo dragon do the same? While computer models show that a Komodo dragon's bite force is relatively modest, around 39 newtons compared to 252 newtons for a similarly sized Australian saltwater crocodile. Its strong neck and sharp teeth make it capable of powerful slashing attacks. So a Komodo dragon could likely bite off its own tail if it wanted to. But why would it? Oddly enough, captive Komodo dragons have been observed biting off their own tails, though the reasons remain a mystery. They just do it, and that's that. Tail loss can also occur when it becomes a hindrance, such as when a lizard is attacked by a large predator like a crocodile. If the tail is injured during the attack, especially if a bone is damaged, it can be more practical for the lizard to tear it off rather than risk dragging it around, which could lead to infection. In theory, a Komodo dragon might even eat its severed tail to avoid wasting valuable nutrients, though this behavior hasn't been documented. From a theoretical perspective, however, losing a tail would significantly reduce a Komodo dragon's chances of survival. Unlike some smaller lizards, Komodo dragons, agamas, and chameleons don't regenerate their tails once lost. Without a tail, a Komodo dragon faces increased risks of blood loss, infection, and diminished ability to compete with healthy individuals, making survival much more challenging. In contrast, many lizard species can shed part of their tails to escape predators. The detached tail continues to wriggle on the ground, diverting the predator's attention away from the lizard's vulnerable body. This distraction can last up to 5 minutes, just enough time for the lizard to make its escape. While the predator focuses on the writhing tail, it provides a small meal rich in stored fat, which can offer some energy to the predator. This exchange benefits the lizard too. A well-fed predator is less likely to pursue the lizard further. Interestingly, some lizards like skinks, may even consume their own discarded tails to reclaim the energy stored within, unless a predator gets to it first. Certain lizards are capable of dropping their tails voluntarily, even with minimal provocation. Rather than being torn off, the tail essentially drops off by itself. This occurs when the lizard flexes muscles at the base of the tail, causing the vertebrae to snap apart. Tail loss typically happens when a predator seizes the tail, but it can also occur when a lizard swims with a damaged or partially broken tail until it eventually detaches. It's difficult to determine whether the lizard intentionally tries to shed its tail, but that's often how it appears. While it's well known that reptiles like geckos and iguanas can regenerate their tails, no one had observed this ability in American alligators until recently. Studies revealed that young alligators can regrow up to 9 inches of lost tail, making them the largest known animals capable of such regeneration. The extent of tissue they can regenerate ranks among the most impressive in the animal kingdom. However, the regrown tails are not identical to the originals. They lack skeletal muscle tissue, which is notable since even some lizards and mammals can regenerate this type of muscle. It's possible that alligators conserve energy by skipping the muscle regrowth phase, which demands significant resources. Despite their robust build compared to other reptiles, young alligators are vulnerable and fall prey to a wide range of predators, including birds, raccoons, and even other alligators. The ability to shed and regenerate their tails could offer them a crucial survival advantage. It remains uncertain if adult alligators share this capability, as scientists have not confirmed it yet. Lizards and young alligators can regenerate their tails. It raises the intriguing question: could dinosaurs, those massive ancient reptiles, have possessed the same ability? While the common ancestors of dinosaurs, alligators, and birds diverged about 250 million years ago, alligators and dinosaurs remain closely related. Unfortunately, no dinosaur fossils with evidence of tail regrowth have been found, but scientists don't rule out the possibility that some dinosaurs might have had this capability. The challenge lies in the nature of the regrown tails. Unlike bones, the regenerated sections of alligator tails consist of cartilage, which does not fossilize as easily as bone. This means that even if dinosaurs did regenerate their tails, the evidence may have long since decayed, making it difficult to confirm this aspect of their biology. When scientists discover a dinosaur skeleton without a tail, they cannot definitively determine if the tail was lost or if the dinosaur had shed it and later regrown it, possibly multiple times. This raises an interesting question. Can a snake bite itself and be harmed by its own venom? Research indicates that it's nearly impossible for a venomous snake to fatally harm itself with its own venom. If a venomous snake accidentally bites itself, its immune system produces antibodies that neutralize the venom. Evolution seems to have taken steps to ensure that snakes can bite themselves without serious consequences. Moreover, under stress, a snake is unlikely to inflict a bite that injects venom, as they instinctively recognize that their venom is ineffective against their own species. This awareness is why fights between snakes can appear somewhat humorous. They don't fully deploy their venomous fangs against opponents who won't be affected. Instead, they tend to coil around one another and push. The story of scorpions is similar, but often misinterpreted. There's a myth that when threatened, such as by fire, a scorpion will sting itself to avoid prolonged suffering. This belief is based on genuine observations, yet it has been misunderstood. Scientists have clarified that scorpions are poikilothermic animals, meaning they cannot regulate their body temperature and rely on their environment for warmth. When exposed to fire, their bodies heat up rapidly, leading to dehydration and causing involuntary spasms in their tails. These spasms can resemble the scorpion stinging itself, but they are merely reflexive movements rather than a deliberate act of self-harm. In the realm of primates, self-injury is a serious concern, especially among captive macaws and monkeys. Approximately 10% of captive monkeys exhibit self-injurious behavior, with this figure rising to 14% among rhesus macaques commonly found in laboratory settings. Various factors can trigger this behavior, including boredom, but it is often rooted in emotional distress. Changes in an animal's environment, such as moving its cage, separating it from a companion, or other significant alterations can lead to emotional distress. Interestingly, recent research has revealed that chronic sleep deprivation can trigger a process where the brain begins to eat itself. This happens because the cells responsible for digesting cellular debris become overactive. It's well known that adequate sleep is vital for optimal brain function. If you've ever stayed up late, you likely noticed an increase in forgetfulness. During sleep, our brains conduct essential housekeeping, eliminating waste and toxins that accumulate throughout the day. However, a lack of sleep disrupts this cleaning process. In simple terms, some brain cells may start consuming the connections between neurons, making us more susceptible to conditions like strokes and Alzheimer's disease. So consider going to bed earlier tonight. In the realm of scientific discovery, Japanese scientist Yoshinori Ohsumi was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine a few years ago for his pioneering work on autophagy. This fascinating process involves an organism essentially consuming parts of itself to maintain health. While it may remind you of how lizards or mantises behave, autophagy is critical for our bodies. Without it, we wouldn't be able to break down and recycle old, damaged, or diseased cellular components. Essentially, even while we are alive, our bodies continuously engage in a form of self-cannibalism, breaking down old materials while also renewing and growing new cells. It's a natural tidying process that clears out old debris to make way for fresh cells. If you're interested in learning more, consider exploring Ohsumi's research further. See you later.